Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Alien professor assigns students to capture risky predator, human befriends and rides it like a horse. The Galactic Academy's lecture hall hummed with anticipation. The room, vast and circular, was designed to accommodate students from every known species, its seating arranged in tiers that spiraled upward like the inside of a grand amphitheater. Holographic displays shimmered above the central podium, projecting the image of a massive creature. Its deep black scales gleamed under artificial light, its eyes burned with a cold, calculating intelligence, and its claws, each the length of a human forearm, looked capable of slicing through steel. The assembled students, representing countless worlds and cultures, whispered among themselves, their voices a mix of hissing, clicking, and guttural tones. Every cadet in the room knew the significance of what was being shown. Professor Zyra, a towering being with elongated limbs and a sharp, angular head, stepped forward, his long robes trailing behind him. He had taught at the academy for decades, witnessing countless cadets fail under the weight of his lessons. His species, the Oran, prided themselves on discipline, logic, and absolute control over the natural world. His piercing gaze swept across the room before he finally spoke. The Vin beast, he said, his voice deep and resonant, is one of the most feared predators in the galaxy. It is an apex hunter, possessing superior strength, speed, and intelligence. It has never been successfully domesticated. It has never been captured without extreme casualties. Many have tried. Many have failed. A murmur spread through the cadets, some exchanging nervous glances. Others, those who had grown up in warlike cultures, leaned forward with barely restrained excitement. Zyra continued, his tone unwavering, for your final survival examination, you will be assigned the task of subduing a live Vin beast on its home world. You may work in teams or alone. You may use any method at your disposal. The only rule, he let the words hang for a moment before continuing, is that the creature must be captured alive. There was a beat of silence before the room erupted. Some students immediately began strategizing, while others scoffed at the absurdity of the challenge. One cadet, a thick-bodied reptilian from the Zareth Dominion, laughed outright. "This is madness," he exclaimed, his voice carrying across the hall. "Vin beasts do not fall to mere students. We would need an army." Zyra did not react to the outburst. "You have 1 week," he said coolly. "Your shuttles will depart tomorrow at dawn." Dismissed. As the students began filing out, Cole Damon remained in his seat, watching the hologram of the beast flicker above the podium. Unlike the others, he did not strategize aloud, nor did he express disbelief. He simply studied the image, noting every detail, the way its claws curved slightly inward, suggesting it relied on grappling prey rather than slicing, the way its nostrils flared, an indication of heightened olfactory senses, the way its legs, despite their bulk, were positioned for sudden bursts of speed. It was a hunter through and through. Cole knew the others would rely on brute force or technology. The reptilian warriors would bring energy nets, the insectoid tacticians would use paralytic toxins, and the robotic cadets would likely attempt to analyze and exploit the creature's weaknesses through calculated algorithms. But Cole had a different idea. He had spent his childhood on Earth in a remote wilderness where his father had taught him how to track, how to move unseen, and most importantly, how to understand the instincts of wild animals. He knew that no true predator could be broken through sheer force. Strength invited resistance. Only trust led to control. As he stood to leave, a voice called out, "Damon." He turned to see one of his classmates approaching. Siri Val, a feline-like alien with piercing yellow eyes, stopped a few feet away. She was taller than him, her frame lithe, her tail flicking behind her in a gesture he had learned to recognize as skepticism. "You don't look worried," she said, tilting her head slightly. Cole shrugged. "Should I be?" She bared her fangs slightly, the closest thing her kind had to a smirk. "Everyone else is planning for war." What are you planning? He considered her for a moment before replying, something different. Siri narrowed her eyes, but whatever she wanted to say, she kept it to herself. Instead, she simply nodded before turning and disappearing into the crowd. The next morning, the cadets boarded their designated shuttles, each bound for a different sector of Vin 4, the beast's home planet. Cole sat near the window, watching as the vibrant blue atmosphere of the Academy's training world faded into the blackness of space. The shuttle's automated systems announced the descent protocols, and moments later, the ship shuddered as it entered the thick, humid air of the jungle-covered world below. As the landing ramp lowered, the oppressive heat hit him first, followed by the deep, earthy scent of the jungle. Towering trees with bioluminescent leaves stretched high above, their canopies nearly blotting out the sky. The sounds of alien wildlife filled the air, a mixture of distant howls, insect-like chirping, and the occasional deep rumble of something massive moving in the underbrush. The other cadets wasted no time deploying their gear. Some activated scanning drones, others set up temporary encampments, and a few immediately rushed into the jungle, eager to find the beast before anyone else. Cole, however, did none of those things. Instead, he took a deep breath, adjusted the strap on his backpack, and began walking. He moved deliberately, his steps careful, avoiding making unnecessary noise. Every few meters, he paused, listening not just to the obvious sounds but to the subtle changes in the environment, the way the distant calls of smaller creatures suddenly stopped, the way the underbrush rustled ever so slightly, not from wind but from something much larger. He was not hunting the Vin. He was letting it find him. Hours passed as he moved deeper into the jungle. He saw signs of the beast's presence, deep claw marks on a tree, shredded carcasses of smaller animals, tracks nearly as wide as his chest. Most would see these as warnings. Cole saw them as an opportunity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and crimson, he finally found what he was looking for, a watering hole. It was a perfect ambush spot, a place where the beast would eventually come to drink. He knew that if he waited, the Vin would appear. But instead of setting up traps or hiding, he did something no other cadet would have considered. He sat down, unzipped his pack, and pulled out a strip of dried meat. With deliberate movements, he placed it on a flat rock near the water's edge, then leaned back against a fallen tree, his posture relaxed. And then he waited. The jungle was alive with the sounds of night. Strange, distant calls echoed through the dense undergrowth, some sharp and piercing, others low and guttural. The bioluminescent flora cast an eerie blue glow over the landscape, their shifting hues making the shadows seem alive. Cole remained seated by the watering hole, his movements slow and deliberate. He had waited for hours, but patience was part of the process. He had learned long ago that the wild operated on its own time, and nothing could be forced. The air carried a dense humidity that clung to his skin, mixing with the scent of damp earth and the metallic tang of stagnant water. His muscles ached from remaining still, but he ignored the discomfort. The jungle around him pulsed with unseen life, shifting ever so slightly in rhythm with the nocturnal cycle. He exhaled softly, steadying his breath. If the Vin was nearby, it had already sensed his presence. Something changed in the air. The background noise of the jungle dimmed. It wasn't an immediate silence, but a gradual shift, a ripple of absence moving outward. The smaller creatures had gone still. The predators had become aware of something greater. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Then he heard it, a low, resonant growl, so deep it seemed to vibrate in his bones. Cole didn't move. He resisted the instinct to turn his head, to scan the darkness beyond the tree line. Instead, he remained as he was, back against the fallen tree, legs loosely bent, arms resting comfortably at his sides. He needed the creature to understand he was not a threat. The sound of movement came next, slow and measured, the unmistakable crunch of massive paws pressing into the damp soil. The Vin was circling him, staying just outside his peripheral vision, its presence felt more than seen. He kept his breathing steady, his body language open. Any sudden motion could turn observation into attack. A long moment passed before he caught the first true glimpse of the beast. It emerged from the thick undergrowth like a shadow given form, its black scales absorbing the faint bioluminescent glow. Its head was massive, its snout elongated, nostrils flaring as it tested the air. Its eyes, two burning orbs of molten gold, locked onto him. It was close enough now that he could see the slight quiver of its nostrils, the flickering movements of its clawed toes digging into the earth. The dried meat he had left on the stone remained untouched. The Vin was not interested in food, not yet. It was testing him. Cole did nothing. He remained still, not out of fear, but because he understood that the wrong reaction would end everything. The beast's instincts would be sharp, honed over centuries of evolution. If it saw weakness, it would attack. If it saw aggression, it would defend itself. But if it saw something different, something outside the bounds of predator and prey, it might hesitate. The Vin took another step closer. The sheer weight of the creature was enough to compress the earth beneath its paws, leaving deep indentations in the soft soil. The muscles along its massive shoulders rippled beneath its thick hide, its form coiled with controlled tension. It released a slow, measured exhale, a test. Cole responded in kind, releasing a slow breath of his own. The beast tilted its head ever so slightly. This was the moment. He reached into his pack, not fast, not slow, just deliberate. The movement was fluid, careful. He pulled out another strip of dried meat, holding it loosely in his palm. He didn't extend his arm, that would be too much, too soon. Instead, he simply let the offering rest in his open hand, allowing the choice to belong entirely to the beast. The Vin watched, its nostrils flared again, and for the first time, its gaze flickered downward toward the food. It hesitated, shifting its weight from one massive paw to the other, its claws flexed, digging deeper into the soil. Cole remained steady. Then, with slow, predatory grace, the beast took another step forward. It was close enough now that he could feel the heat radiating from its body, the faint scent of raw earth and something more primal. It lowered its head just slightly, its lips pulling back to reveal massive, curved fangs, a warning. He didn't flinch. The beast's breath was warm as it hovered over his hand, nostrils expanding as it took in the scent of the food. It did not strike. It did not snap. It simply waited. Another test. Cole slowly, carefully turned his palm outward, shifting the dried meat onto the stone beside him. Then he withdrew his hand, placing it back on his knee in the same relaxed posture. The movement was subtle, deliberate, meant to communicate one simple truth: he was not demanding anything. For several seconds, nothing happened. The beast remained still, watching him with those unblinking golden eyes. Then, without a sound, it lowered its head further and took the offering. The crunch of its powerful jaws echoed through the clearing, sharp and deliberate. It devoured the food in 2 swift bites, its gaze never leaving him. Cole exhaled again. This was not victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. The Vin shifted its stance, its tail swaying slightly as it stepped back, eyes narrowing in quiet calculation. It was still unsure, still wary, but it had not attacked. It had not fled. It was thinking. Cole allowed himself the smallest of smiles. This was not an animal that could be subdued. This was not something that could be broken or tamed. It was a force of nature, a being of instinct and power. But he did not need to break it. He only needed it to understand. The beast let out a low, rumbling sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, a noise of curiosity. Then, as silently as it had come, it turned and disappeared back into the jungle. Cole did not move. He knew it would return, and next time, it would not just be watching. The jungle remained still long after the Vin had disappeared into the undergrowth. Cole did not move. He kept his posture relaxed, his breathing steady, his presence undemanding. He had spent enough time in the wild to know that patience was the key. The moment he forced an action, the moment he tried to rush what had begun, the fragile balance between him and the beast would shatter. The night stretched on, the bioluminescent glow of the flora shifting in waves of blue and violet as the ecosystem pulsed with life. In the distance, a predator let out a shrill, bone-chilling cry, answered by a chorus of smaller creatures that scurried through the underbrush. The jungle was full of hunters and prey, of constant motion, of silent deaths hidden beneath the thick canopy. Yet here, in the clearing by the watering hole, there was stillness. His mind remained sharp, attuned to every flicker of movement, every rustle of leaves. He knew the Vin had not gone far. It was watching. It was testing. The moment it had taken the food from his offering, a new dynamic had formed, one delicate and uncertain. The beast was trying to understand him as much as he was trying to understand it. A faint vibration trembled through the ground beneath him, subtle but unmistakable. Heavy footfalls, cautious and deliberate, moving closer once more. His heartbeat remained steady. He did not turn his head. He let the beast come to him. The low growl that followed was different from the one he had heard before. It was no longer a warning. It was a question. Cole slowly shifted his gaze to the side, just enough to catch the outline of the creature emerging from the darkness. It moved like liquid shadow, its form blending seamlessly with the deep blues and purples of the jungle night. Its golden eyes burned through the darkness, locked onto him with an intensity that sent a primal shiver down his spine. It was close again, closer than before. It did not charge. It did not posture. It simply stood, its body taut with restrained power, its massive claws flexing against the damp earth. The muscles along its shoulders twitched, as if fighting an internal battle between instinct and curiosity. He made no sudden movements. Instead, he reached into his pack with the same slow, deliberate control he had used before, pulling out another strip of dried meat. This time, he did not place it on the rock. He held it lightly between his fingers, just at the edge of his knee, offering but not demanding. The beast's nostrils flared. A flicker of hesitation passed through its eyes, a struggle between caution and desire. Then, in a motion so fast it was nearly imperceptible, it snapped forward, its massive maw engulfing the offering before retreating just as quickly. The force of its movement sent a gust of warm breath against his skin, but he did not flinch. The Vin chewed slowly, its piercing gaze never leaving him. He could see the tension in its body, the way its muscles coiled, ready to spring away at the first sign of threat. But it did not run. It remained. The silence stretched between them, charged with something unspoken. Cole had seen this before, in the eyes of wolves, in the wary steps of wild horses. It was the moment when fear and trust balanced on the edge of a knife, where one wrong move could tip everything into chaos. He did not push. He let the creature decide. The Vin's tail flicked once, a movement too subtle for most to notice, but he saw it. A shift in weight, a testing of boundaries. It was still uncertain, still holding itself in check, but something had changed. The beast exhaled deeply, a slow, rumbling sound that sent a vibration through the air. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it turned and disappeared into the jungle once more. Cole remained where he was, listening as its heavy footfalls faded into the night. He knew it would return. He could feel it. The hunt had changed. The Vin was no longer seeing him as prey. It was seeing him as something else entirely. Morning came slow, the light filtering through the dense canopy in soft beams of gold and green. The humidity had thickened, wrapping around him like a second skin. He had barely slept, but exhaustion did not weigh on him. His mind was too sharp, too focused on the next step. He rose to his feet, stretching the stiffness from his limbs, and moved toward the water's edge. He crouched, cupping the cool liquid in his hands and drinking deeply, letting the chill spread through him. The jungle remained in constant motion, its life undisturbed by his presence. Then he felt it again, a shift in the air, a presence. Slowly, he turned. The Vin was there. It stood at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by the thick foliage. Its golden eyes gleamed in the morning light, watching him with an unreadable expression. But this time, there was no growl, no flicker of bared fangs. It had returned of its own choice. Cole exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle. Then he did something no one else would have dared. He took a step forward. The beast tensed, its claws digging into the soil. He stopped. No sudden movements, no aggression. He let the silence speak for him. The Vin did not move. Another step. Still, it remained. He reached into his pack, pulling free another strip of dried meat, and this time, he extended it fully. No hesitation, no retreat, an open gesture. The beast's nostrils flared, its tail flicking once, twice. Then it took a step forward, a single measured step. The distance between them shrank to nothing. The Vin lowered its massive head, its eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Its lips curled back slightly, revealing the tips of its fangs. Not a threat. A test. Cole held firm. The beast let out a slow, deep breath. Then, with careful precision, took the offering from his hand. Not in a snap, not in a lunge. In a choice. It stood there for a long moment, chewing slowly, watching him with something that had never been in its gaze before, recognition. Cole's pulse remained steady, his expression calm. He had seen this before, in the wild places of Earth. The moment when a predator decided, truly decided, that another living thing was no longer an enemy. The Vin swallowed the last bite, exhaled, and then did something that sent a shock of realization through him. It stepped closer, not to attack, not to retreat, but to stand beside him. A choice had been made. Cole did not move, and neither did the beast. The Vin did not leave. It stood beside Cole, its massive frame coiled with restrained tension, its golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made the air between them feel heavier. The jungle remained alive around them, the distant calls of unseen creatures filling the humid morning air, but here in this clearing by the watering hole, a new silence had settled, a silence that was no longer born of wariness but of something far more fragile. Cole did not move, not immediately. He knew that to push too soon, to attempt to force what was happening, would undo everything. Instead, he allowed the moment to stretch between them, let the beast decide its own pace. It had returned. It had accepted food from his hand. But trust was not something won so easily. Trust had to be built. The Vin shifted its weight slightly, its tail flicking once before curling loosely behind it, a small movement but an important one. It was not poised to flee. It was not preparing to attack. It was waiting. Cole slowly reached into his pack, careful to make no sudden motions. He pulled free another strip of dried meat, but this time, he did not extend it immediately. He held it loosely in his fingers, letting the Vin see that he had it but offering no expectation. The beast's nostrils flared as it caught the scent, its muscles tightening in anticipation. It had already learned that he was not an enemy, that food did not come with a trap. But now he needed to show it something else, that food was not the only thing he could offer. Instead of holding the meat out to the beast, Cole turned his attention elsewhere. He moved his free hand to the ground beside him, brushing away the layer of damp leaves to reveal the soil beneath. Then, without looking at the Vin, he dug his fingers into the earth, scooping up a handful of the dark, rich dirt. He let it crumble between his fingers before repeating the motion, his movements slow, deliberate. The beast watched. It did not lunge for the food. It did not grow impatient. It was observing, waiting, trying to understand. Cole continued, using his hands to smooth a small section of earth, pressing it flat. Then, still ignoring the Vin directly, he placed the strip of dried meat onto the cleared ground, and then he sat back. The offer was there, no pressure, no expectation, a simple act. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a slow, measured motion, the Vin stepped forward, its massive paws pressed into the softened earth, its golden eyes flicking between him and the food. It was thinking. He could almost see the gears of instinct and intelligence turning beneath the surface of its predatory mind. Then, finally, it bent its head and took the offering. Cole did not react. He did not flinch, did not shift, did not speak. He only watched. The beast ate slower this time, more thoughtful in its movements. When it finished, it lifted its head again, its gaze locking onto him. The tension had lessened. Its breathing was steady. Its muscles, though still powerful, no longer carried the same edge of readiness to spring into action. This was progress. Cole let out a slow breath and shifted his position, this time fully turning his body to face the Vin. It tensed at the motion but did not retreat. He studied it, taking in the details he had not allowed himself to fully analyze before. Its body was covered in thick, layered scales, each one overlapping in a pattern that would make traditional weapons useless. Its limbs were built for power, its frame designed for speed. But it was not just a brute force predator. It was intelligent, too intelligent to be merely captured. That was why everyone had failed before. They had tried to take control, but the Vin was not something to be controlled. It was something to be understood. Cole slowly extended his hand, palm open, fingers relaxed, not an order, not a demand, just a presence. The Vin's ears flicked slightly, its tail twitching in consideration. It did not lunge. It did not strike. It simply remained still, watching his hand with the same calculated curiosity it had shown him since the beginning. And then, for the first time, it moved, not toward the food, not in retreat, but toward him. The massive creature took a step forward, its golden eyes narrowing as it lowered its head slightly. Its nostrils flared, taking in his scent, memorizing it. It was testing this new boundary, this new shift in their fragile dynamic. Cole did not move. He allowed the Vin to make its own decision. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the beast brought its snout closer until it was mere inches from his outstretched palm.